In 1.16, we have a bunch of word problems. Now, these word problems get us kind of to think algebraically. So again, when we hear the word algebraic, we think variable. So we're going to be making some equations and trying to solve these equations, and all these equations will involve a variable, all right? So this first one says that two consecutive numbers add up to 55. What are the two numbers? Now, obviously, you could just guess and check, right? I could say, well, let's try 21 plus 22. Well, that's 43. I need more, so that doesn't work. Let's try 25 plus 26. That's 51. I'm getting closer, but still not quite. Maybe 27 plus 28. That adds up to 55. All right, so we found it. So I get that you can just guess and check with this, but it's going to get a lot harder than these. Okay, you're not just going to have an easy problem like this. It might say three consecutive numbers add up to 5,295, right? So you might have more difficult problems where you can't rely on guess and check methods, and you actually have to use algebra to solve these. All right. Now, in a problem like this, it says two consecutive numbers. So I'm going to call my first number, I'm just going to call it x. And then the second number, I have to think of something. I don't want to call it y. It is a different number, so I could use a different variable. But the issue is that if I use two different variables, I'm not going to be able to solve the equation. I have to just use one variable. So if I think about any number, the number that comes after it is always one more. So if I take that first number and then add 1 to it, that would give me a consecutive number. So it tells me that these two numbers add up to 55. So that means I could take my first number, x, I could add it with my second number, which is x plus 1, and these two values should add up to 55, right? This is my first number, this is my second number, and they're consecutive. They're one after each other. So this means I have 2x plus 1 is equal to 55. If I subtract 1 on both sides, we get 2x equals 54. And if I divide both sides by 2, we get x equals 27. And would you look at that? Our first number is 27. That means that the second number, one more than that, is going to be 28. All right, so that's how we get our answer. Second problem, it says over winter break, you worked at the clothing store and made $9 an hour. During the 2 weeks, you worked 65 hours at regular pay and 10 hours of overtime. Now, overtime is usually considered to be 1.5 times the regular pay, or they call it times and a half sometimes. All right, so we want to know how much money did you make? Now, you worked a total of 65 hours at regular pay and 10 hours of overtime. We know the regular pay is $9 an hour, so I'm going to take that $9 and multiply it by those 65 hours. Okay, and then I'm going to add that with my overtime. Now we know that overtime is 1.5 times the regular pay. So if I take 1.5 times 9, that gives me 13.5. So that means that you make $13.50 an hour when you're doing overtime, and of course you did work 10 hours of overtime. All right, so if we go ahead and multiply these together, we end up with $585. And then if we multiply these, we should get $135. All right, so if we add these together, our total comes out to be $720. All right, and that is the total that you would get paid. Last one here, Elise is taking piano lessons. The first lesson is twice as expensive as each additional lesson. Her mom spends $270 for each lesson. How much was the first lesson? All right, so let's call the regularly priced lessons X, how about? All right, so X is a regular price lesson, okay? Now, we know that the first lesson is twice as expensive as all the additional ones, all right? So that means that if we have the first one is twice as expensive, so twice X, all right, this is the first lesson right here, plus all her additional lessons. Well, each additional lesson is just X dollars, right? That's a regular price lesson. Now we know that she's took a total of 8 lessons. So here's her first lesson, that counts as one lesson here. We need 7 more to get the total price. So we have to put a 7 here, right? and that's going to equal a total of $270. All right, so that first lesson is twice as much, so 2 times x, and we put a 7x here because each of these regular price lessons, which are just x, there were 7 of them, right? 1 plus 7 gets me a total of 8. So when I go ahead and solve this now, 2x plus 7x is 9x. That's going to equal 270. Divide both sides by 9, and we end up with 30. So that means that each regular lesson is $30. We want to know how much was the first lesson. That's the question here. So first lesson is going to be $60, right? Because 30 times 2 is 60. And then the additional 7 lessons, those are each $30, right? So this is what we're looking for right there. That first lesson is going to be $60.